So today we're talking about building your best extracurricular profile. Is more geared towards not necessarily college application, but all the questions that revolves around extracurriculars, activities, etc. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to do a brief welcome. I will introduce myself. And then for the last 15 minutes, we will have a brief Q&A session. And for that, you can just type in your answers in the chat using either the chat or hopefully the Q&A box, which you can see at the top of the screen, hopefully. Okay. This is me. I have never really gotten over, should I say, that the Asian feeling of feeling slightly awkward talking about myself. But I tell all my students that they should work on it, so I shall too. So I studied at UCLA. I went on to get my master's at the University of Chicago. I also studied law at Duke University. Before I realized that the practice of law, for as lovely as it is not for me. And now I currently work with the majority of students on college applications, planning, etc., as a counselor. So to our topic of the day, which is what is an extracurricular profile? Most people will know what it is from the term extracurricular, right? It means outside of curriculum. So it's usually used to refer to a collection of the students' activities, accomplishments, achievements that are outside of the purely school-related, academic-related, such as GPA, standardized test scores, etc. That does not mean that these activities cannot be academic in nature, but it is something separate from, shall we say, purely school-related coursework. And oftentimes it can be referred to in a resume form or an activity list. So most people, I think, have a general idea of what this entails. So why is an extracurricular profile important? One, I think, is a good measure, aside from the obvious, of how students invest their time. Because you only have 4 years in college, and there is enough time for students to accomplish many things that do not simply involve, sitting in a class or taking exams. So the extracurricular profile becomes a means of weighing, did the student take advantage of any opportunities? How did the student invest their time? What are their passions, right? And then, of course, as everyone knows, it is a very important dimension of the college application process, right? You submit your transcript, your GPA, you submit your standardized test scores, you have your essays, but then you also submit an activity list, which contains items that will constitute the student's extracurricular profile. And especially at top tier universities, where quite frankly, oftentimes the GPA and the test scores become quite uniform, it becomes an important way for the student to distinguish themselves, to stand out in the crowd, to show why they in particular are a good fit for X school. So now we're actually going to do something different. I want to try a bit of an interactive activity. So I'd like to ask all you attendees to type responses in the chat. If you want to be anonymous, you can rename yourself so that way your name is more anonymous, but I do hope we can get some participation. I am going to show you guys a student's extracurricular profile. And my question is, based on what is here, what do you think the student wants to study in college? What do you think their passions are? So I will read aloud some of them. So one is AFRL, which is the Air Force Research Laboratory. And they supported spacecraft mission planning and software development. The second one is the Cisco Virtual Tech Camp, in which they completed quite a few programming related courses. The third is the Aspiring Scholars Directed Research Program. And this comes up twice since they did it 2 summers in a row. And here they used Python to analyze gender bias and Indeed. And in another year, they did computational modeling of cancer, I can't pronounce it, metastasis and tumor evolution using NetLogo. They also did the Blue Stamp Engineering Summer Program. They were the president and webmaster of the Neuroscience Club. They were a captain at the Engineering Science Olympiad team, secretary of the Spark Club, which is a community service club, aimed at bridging the educational gap and teaching students computing and technology at an earlier age. And last but not least, they were co-president of Girls Who Code. This is also not their complete extracurricular profile. This is just the beginning of it. But just based on what I've mentioned above, and again, I do hope that people can type something in the chat, what do you think the student wants to study in college? What major do you think they would declare that's appropriate? So this person created Poke2, that is a Pokemon Discord bot with 3.6 million registered users across 950,000 communities. So it's some sort of almost AI bot. They were part of the UCSB Research Mentorship Program, in which they studied unsupervised loss modeling for noise-robust multimodal networks. They were a part of Contest Dojo. They helped develop a math competition platform from scratch to be used at multiple tournaments. They created a mobile app for their high school, and they were also part of Project Code Foundation, which is an organization that teaches classes to the community. I see people are already on top of this. And of course, they're part of NanoMath. They're also part of FBLA and the Science Olympiad. So what do you think this person wants to study in college? I have a programmer, yes. Do I have any other responses for this one? And that's correct. This person also wants to apply for CS. Very, very well-crafted extracurricular profiles, right? And this is the level that I think that all students should try to achieve for when they are designing their extracurricular profile. Two eventually is going to Berkeley EECS, which is also a wonderful, wonderful program. Okay, so where does this lead us? Well, one, it leads us in two directions. First of all, the strengths of both those profiles is that they were focused, right? It was very clear to everyone in the seminar that when you looked at those activity profiles, you knew immediately this person wanted to study computer science, that they were a programmer. And I think from the start of high school, even if students are not sure of what direction they want to take, towards the end of high school, they should have a specific direction and they should try to focus their profile so that it's the direction they want to take is convincing. For instance, if I had shown you a profile and the person had mostly done, art activities or dance or something like mathematics, and then in their college application, they said, I want to study psychology. And in their extracurricular profile, they've done nothing related to psychology. They've taken no classes related to psychology. Then as an admissions person, you would find it unconvincing as well, right? Because there is no action or evidence to substantiate that person's claim in a way. So one thing is there are many different types of extracurricular activities that students can be involved in. The first are the traditional school clubs, and I think everyone is aware of that. Schools, every single school, be they private or public, offer a variety of clubs. It can be journalism, it can be the STEM club. Some schools offer a robotics club. It could be also like the yearbook, etc. What some students may not be aware of is that you're not limited only by the offerings of your school. For instance, if you are really, really passionate about neuroscience and your school doesn't have a neuroscience club, that's okay. Start your own, right? All schools have a process by which students can start their own clubs. It really only requires an advisor and initiative on the student's part. So school clubs are a wonderful way for students to initially be involved. But again, I think you're not limited by only what's offered. You can always take the initiative and start your own clubs. There's also outside organizations. I think people who are part of things like art or dance are very aware of this, as well as different organizations outside of the school that will offer activities, opportunities related to whatever a student's interest area is. Now, of course, number 3 is research projects, right? Usually in the STEM area, I see many students who are interested in research. And while especially for younger high school students, of course, no professor is going to immediately allow a 9th grader to enter their lab, and do original lab work. There are still ways to work yourself up to that, if not the original lab work, but to get into a lab and perhaps work with a mentor or a research professor. There are opportunities for students to experience that. I did have, not a student, but I think years ago, I had a friend who actually was able to work her way up to working with, I think, a professor with cancer research. And that was very wonderful on her profile. She was eventually admitted to Harvard. And course number 4, competitions. Right, there are a variety of competitions that students can attend, ranging from the Olympiad. I'm sure everyone here knows about the AMC and the multiple math competitions, but there are also creative writing competitions, there are art competitions. There are many, many opportunities for students to be involved in if competitions are what they are interested in. Sometimes the danger of competitions is some students are not good at dealing with rejection, right? That if they enter a competition and then they don't win, it discourages them sometimes from the subject entirely. So I think sometimes you have to be, what is the term? You need to be judicious about what competitions students enter. Quite frankly, some students may be more suited towards research projects than competitions. But I think personally that they're a wonderful way for students, high achieving students especially, to be involved. And of course, there are summer programs. Quite a few colleges, university, independent organizations offer multiple summer programs each year. And summer is also a time when students have more free time. So they should not be, just not doing anything. There are also very prestigious summer programs, such as what is it called? The research one. And then there's also less prestigious ones. So when you are researching summer programs, you can also see where they rank in terms of prestige. There's also internships, although of course that's usually more open to older students than younger students. If a student is interested in a specific career, internships are a wonderful way for them to understand the ins and outs of that career. And last but not least, there's community service, which is also a really important part of the extracurricular profile, since a lot of colleges value, I think someone mentioned before, the community element, right? Building a community, having a service-oriented mindset. So that's one way that you can organize these. Another way is just through the different interest areas that they are a part of, including the arts, dance, STEM, athletics, leadership, community service, volunteerism, and academic. So academic would be more like the Olympiad or honor societies. So again, these are different types of extracurricular activities that students can be involved in. It's not limited to this. The key thing is that you want to do your research, because what I find is that there are so many opportunities available to high school students, but unless sometimes, especially for public school students, unless they are proactive, they will never even be aware of these opportunities in the first place. So it's up to the student or their counselor or whoever to look up the interest areas that students are interested in and to see what opportunities are available. So I will show you some examples of just summer programs that I've looked up for my students. One is very interested in research. This is the one I was thinking about, Research Science Institute. That's the very prestigious program, right? There's other ones like the UCSB Research Mentorship Program, the Boston University RISE program. But most high school students may not even be aware of these opportunities because it's not marketed to them directly, right? Some of them may not have a counselor, or they may not have a school that will make these opportunities visible to them. So it's really either it is up to the student, a mentor, etc., to bring these opportunities to their awareness so that way they can apply to them. Here is another example, because this is a STEM-based one. These are art summer programs that someone interested in art would be able to attend, right? So quite a few prestigious art colleges will offer these summer sessions for students, and sometimes for as young as G9. Some other summer programs will limit it to G11 and above. But again, if a student is interested in art, sometimes they're not even aware of these opportunities. And I think sometimes with an extracurricular profile, that can be one of the more difficult steps, that they think the only opportunities available to them are either the ones in their school or their local vicinity, and that's not the case. There are quite a few different opportunities that are available to high school students. And it's a matter, again, of doing your research, being aware of them, seeing which one is a good fit for your student, and applying to them, right? To see if you can participate in them. Okay. Another thing is that through my years of working with students, I've noticed a few common weaknesses of extracurricular profiles. First one is obvious, just not enough activities. Maybe this person even has like a 4.5 weighted GPA and like 1580 on the SAT, like 15 fives on the AP. But then when you look at their activity list, it's like blank, right? All they did was study. I don't know, that they didn't do anything else, no involvement, in which case you're really at a difficult position, because then your extracurricular profile is very weak. If someone is raising their hand, could you please type your question in the Q&A box? I promise to answer your question at the end of the session, unless you have a question directly related to this, but still put it in the Q&A box. Thank you very much. Another one is just simply too many activities with no depth associated with any of them, right? It's just like they did everything, but they were not good at anything. There's nothing outstanding. They didn't seem to be very invested in any of the activities they were a part of. But it's like they have 15 activities, but none of them, again, are very impressive, right? I think someone said in the chat before, no tangible results, right? That's very true. Sometimes there's just no tangible results. Or it just seems, like they weren't particularly an actual part in any of these activities. It's just there, but you have no idea what they did in these activities. Number 3 is one that I've seen more throughout the years, which is closely related to number 2, which is the student is unable to articulate why they even joined this activity or why they continue to participate in it. And usually when this happens, I'll ask them like, oh, why did you join X and X club? And their response will be, my mom told me to do this. Okay, that sometimes that's fair. Like for younger children, they need a push from their parents, right? But you cannot, for all 4 years you are involved in that club, have the answer be, I joined this club and I'm invested in it because my parents told me to, right? No college wants to admit a student that only does things because their parent told them to, because when they go off to college, they won't have any parent. Does that mean they won't do anything? So that's number 3. They may even have good activities, but you have no idea why they joined these activities, right? You have no idea what their motivations are. It just seems they were going with the flow or some external force pushed them to. Number 4 is just the activities seem to lack any focus or purpose. It's all over the place. What does the student want to study? I don't know. They did psychology this year. Then they joined this journalism club junior year. Then they joined the lacrosse team sophomore year. Then they did X senior year. It's just all over the place. This person is just doing things because they felt a whim, but there is no focus, there is no theme, and sometimes there is no commitment, right? It's not good when colleges will notice that you only spent a year in each club. Right? Why did you quit? How come you weren't invested? So I think for myself, working as a counselor, these are the 4 common weaknesses I see. Maybe you even know people who you would think fit these profiles as well. So then what do we do? Right? How can we correct this? One is focus on quality over quantity. Again, if you do 30 activities, but you are not invested in any of these activities, right? You're not a leader in any of these activities, then those activities don't hold much weight. If you can't articulate why these activities are meaningful, then it doesn't matter if you have 30 activities, if they're all quote unquote average activities. I know people are asking, okay, what is an average activity? I think I'll go over that a bit more in the second slide after this. But again, you don't need 30 activities to be admitted to a top college. It's much better to have 10, but 10 that are clearly very meaningful to you and that you clearly invested a lot of time in, or that you achieve tangible impact in. Another one is demonstrate participation and investment. I always tell my students, if you're joining this club and all you do is show up to a meeting and sit in a seat and listen to other people talk, that's useless. You might as well have not joined that club. Right? That is not what colleges are looking for. That is not very helpful to you if all you are is a participant, right? It's not impressive. It doesn't show self-growth to just show up to a meeting and sit in a seat at that meeting. Instead, what you want to demonstrate is investment. So instead of just being a person who sits, you want to be the person who speaks up, right? The person who makes the club better. I will also have students who often complain to me about the clubs, right? They're like, oh, this club is so unorganized. We only meet, once every 3 weeks. And then I'll ask them, well, what did you do to make this club better? You're a member of this club, right? Did you do anything to try to solve this issue and try to make it better? And then oftentimes they don't say anything, right? But then that's my point being that if you truly want to be invested in a club, you don't have to be invested in every single club, right? But if this is a club that is related to your subject area, don't just wait for other people to fix the mistakes or the errors you see in this club. Step up yourself, show yourself to be a leader, show yourself to be, again, more than someone who just sits, and make the club better through your presence in the club, right? The club is not any different. Whether or not you attend the meeting or not, then you're not really that invested in the club, right? And again, colleges are looking for the people who are invested, right? They don't care about the people who just show up and listen. That's not impressive. You want to show that you're the person who can deliver tangible impact, right? To create change. Last but not least, you want to select a particular theme or purpose for your activities. Oftentimes students can't do this in grade 9. That's completely fair because they're still exploring their different options. Maybe they're not even sure what they want to study in the future. But by a certain point, you should have a clear idea of at least what general area you want to be in. Is it STEM? Is it biology? Is it engineering? Is it coding? And then you should focus your activities based on whatever that interest is. Also, students should never do things just because someone else does them, right? Don't just follow the crowd. Like, oh, my friend did this, I'm going to do this too. Well, do you want to pursue the same major your friend does? Do you have the same interests your friend does? Don't be a follower, right? You want to invest in activities that are a good fit for you. And again, create an extracurricular profile that when someone looks at it, they can easily say, ah, this person wants to study this without even reading their essays. Okay, so another question that people often ask is, when should I start building an extracurricular profile, or at least thinking intentionally about it? And I always say the earlier, the better. You don't want to wait until grade 11 and think, okay, well, maybe this summer I do something to help my application. It's too late by then. You're grade 11. You only have a summer, right? I should have done this earlier. So I always say start G9. And G9, I think it's completely fair to think you want to be more exploratory, right? Because again, at that age, students may be more unsure what they want to commit to. And that's fine. I always encourage my students to join a variety of clubs, G9. But then by G10 to G12, that's when I say you want to focus, you want to narrow down, and you want to invest more in the clubs that you select. That doesn't mean that students should only do things related to their interest area. I was actually talking to a parent whose daughter also went to Harvard. And I asked her, well, what do you think was really helpful about your daughter's admission? And her daughter is studying biology. And she actually said DECA, which is what is that? That's related, that's the business-oriented club where they attend competitions. And she said, the reason why I felt that was very important is because it taught my daughter how to present herself, right? How to dress professionally, how to speak professionally, how to interact in a way that's very, what would the term be? I suppose, I don't want to use the term professional, but I suppose mature, right? To help her develop poise. So I thought that was very interesting. So while it's true that I always encourage my students to have a narrowed focus and to definitely explore activities based on their interest areas, that does not mean that, oh, that means you cannot explore like anything outside of that, right? Some diversity is good as long as the majority of your extracurricular profile still demonstrates a goal. The issue is when there's nothing that's connected to anything. And again, when you just have a bunch of short-term activities that show no improvement. Okay, so now that I've talked a bit about the extracurricular profile, I did want to share a bit about what 7EDU offers. One is we offer an independent research project. And this is not only related to STEM related studies, even though that is what the majority of our students are interested in, at least according to this project. I actually have students who are interested in humanities. For instance, I think some are making documentaries this year based on humanities oriented subjects. But this is a wonderful way, I think, especially for a ninth grader to explore their interest and maybe for an older student to show initiative. Another thing we offer is the college application workshop because the activity list or the extracurricular profile also helps a lot for the college application essays. Since if you did not invest in anything during your school years, if you did not participate in anything except for schoolwork, then there's very little substance for your college application essays. So I did want to share this with you, with the audience right now, in case people forget later. Okay, but now I think we have 10 minutes before I open up to Q&A. I did want to speak briefly about the activity lists, since ultimately those 4 years of working on this extracurricular profile and being invested in all these activities is going to be demonstrated on the application as the activity list. So the activity list is not your personal statement. It is not an essay. It's also not just a list of organization names, and it is different from a CV or a resume. It has a very different format. Last but not least is not what I would say a narrative summary. And by that, I mean, you shouldn't be telling a story in your, you shouldn't be telling a literal story in your activity list, right? Instead, what I am talking about are the activity lists that are a part of every single application. And for this one, I put a screenshot here from the common application. And you'll notice it has criteria like the activity type, the position, leadership description, organization name, and then also essentially the accomplishments, the investment of the student, right? As well as the years you were invested in. So it's a very, I would say, streamlined, formatted way, specifically for the college application that they look at to see what the student's extracurricular profile is. And it's different from school to school and app to app. The Common App has these requirements. You get 10 activities maximum. So if you do 30, you have to select 10. You should also not be doing 30. I think that's already a warning sign that something went wrong. So 10 activities maximum. You receive 50 characters for the position leadership description, 100 characters, and then 150 characters for the activity details, honors one, and accomplishments. So you'll notice that students don't have that much words, or I should say characters, to summarize their accomplishments. So in which case it becomes a writing exercise in concision. You get 10 activities for this. Okay, this is an example of a Common App. Regarding formatting, I don't think there is you can only format it this way. I mostly just tell my students you need to be consistent. You can't use one type of formatting for one entry item and another type of formatting. Okay, this is from the Coalition app. A few schools will use the Coalition app, and they will give students 8 activities maximum but you have 255 characters for the activity description. So that already tells you what their aim is. They're not looking for students that are, over like spread thin. They want to see investment, impact, and leadership in the activities the students have selected. This is an example. It's from the same profile, but this is it expanded for the coalition activity list. I think one thing that this does very well is it does tell you what the significance of this activity is. Okay, here is the UC application. That's 20 activities maximum. So the UC allows a lot of space for their activities and 350 characters for the activity description. This is, you can notice that the UC's focus is much more on the extracurricular profile, especially since they don't accept standardized test scores. So clearly, they are very much looking for strong extracurricular profiles that demonstrate what we discussed before. Here it is expanded for the UC activity list. Okay, and last but not least, I want to show you guys MIT. MIT only allows 4 activities, but they want a lot of description for their activity. They give 40 words. So notice this is the only one without a character limit. So again, a school like MIT is looking for what we discussed before, not like 20 activities before investment, etc. within those activities. They want the students to showcase their accomplishments, their achievements, their leadership within those activities. And this is an example of the same profile from MIT. I think MIT is the only one in which I would recommend that students write incomplete sentences. The others is completely fine to use semicolons and incomplete sentences. Okay, some people will also ask, what is the difference between a resume and activity list? Because some colleges also ask for a resume. One is just the formatting. The resume is formatted differently. And I think the resume is more comprehensive because you can include details in there, such as your GPA, such as skills that you have, right? And it's not only just activities. Now, the activity list is really only for the express purpose of extracurricular activities. It's an opportunity apart from the essays for the students to give some context to their extracurricular activities, i.e., why is this activity impressive, right? What did I accomplish in it, right? What did I demonstrate in it? And it's for the express purpose of college applications. Okay, here are some activity lists / resume do's and don'ts, because I think it's also helpful to know how you want to draft these, just so that you know in a way also how you should think about your extracurricular profile. Because I always tell my students, you don't want to be aimless in your extracurricular activities. You want to have a goal for this club you're a part of, right? You want to think, what do I want to accomplish in this club? Why am I in this club? How am I going to be invested in this club? So one, you'll notice the strict word count. So you want to trim ruthlessly. You want to be a master at editing. Don't use the same verb. That's just bad writing. Vary your word choice. Use clear active verbs. And here you'll notice that I said emphasize tangible, measurable impact. And that simply means if you are talking about, your contribution to this activity, don't use vague terms such as made meetings better or helped helped participation. How much did you help, right? Well, if you say increase club from 20 to 50 members and reach of club from, X city to statewide, that's much more convincing than just saying made club better, right? So don't be vague. Emphasize the tangible, measurable impact you had within your activity. Include any responsibilities that demonstrate leadership skills. Sometimes my students are worried that it's not impressive, but I always say that, look, even administrating, or organizing events, that's a part of leadership as well. And you should always mention it. You also want to make sure whoever reads your activity list is aware why something is impressive. Don't assume that your reader knows X activity is impressive. You want to communicate the selectivity of an accomplishment if it is very selective. And you also, while you do want to brag in your activity list, this is because the activity list is not the time for modesty. You also want to be reasonable, right? You don't want to say, like, I cured cancer by working within this lab, because no one is going to believe you. And then when you've lost authenticity, then you're in trouble. So again, vary your verbs, edit ruthlessly, emphasize your measurable impact and leadership skills, but don't exaggerate. Be honest still. Like, you should be proud of yourself, but you shouldn't be arrogant, because they will spot that and they will not be happy. This is also an activity list template that we offer our students. This is taken directly from the Common Application. And I tend to ask my counseling students to start working on this from 10th grade, because I do, again, want them to think intentionally. Okay, so that concludes the presentation part of our seminar. I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and I'm going to see what questions we already have in the chat, because I think we have 3. So if you guys still have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A box. Let's see, is it good to set up a nonprofit? What do you mean by good? As in, is it going to help me on my college applications? Again, yes, it's good to set up a nonprofit, but here's what I'm afraid of, that someone else is setting up that nonprofit, and then the student is not doing any work. They're just having someone else do the work, and then their name is on it. Okay, so the answer is yes, it is good to set up a nonprofit, especially if the student is doing the process of setting it up, right? Because then that will show great commitment, leadership skill, etc. Yeah, of course, especially if the nonprofit is related to a student's interest area. Like if they're interested in psychology, they start a mental health nonprofit. Is there any recommended summer camp focused on engineering, ME, and or EE? There's quite a few. There was the Blue Stamp Engineering, but I think I would, for a question like this, you would need to meet with a specific student, right? And see what type of summer camp are they interested in? Is more research oriented, so more project based? What grade are they? Are they interested in on-site or online? So you would still need to do your research based on that. How important is having a job in the extracurricular portfolio? Like, are you talking about an internship where you work somewhere? One, high schoolers, it is very difficult. I don't think high schoolers can be hired to like actual corporations for like full-time, like what's the term? Like like they're not being hired as a full-time scientist, right? Most jobs are in the service industry, or you might be part of a volunteer internship, right? There might be some internships available to high school students. If you're just talking about a job in the sense of, okay, I work in the service industry or I work as a waiter, I think that's fine, especially since it will give students life experience that will benefit them. It's not 100% required, but I also don't think that is going to harm the student. I think oftentimes the issue I run into is that some of my students are so busy that even if they wanted to, work in the service industry just for the experience, they don't have the time, right? Because I think it would be more important for them to maybe be involved in their research program than to, just work a job, right? So I think it depends on the student as well. Are there any recommended extracurriculars, interns, camps, and programs for a psychology major? Again, I think I would need to speak to your student first. and see exactly what area of psychology are they interested in, what types of programs are they interested in, right? And all these things like that. Uh, a lot of you guys want recommendations on extracurricular activities. I think for that, again, my answer is I really would need, or someone would really need to meet with the student to speak to the student, to kind of, gather more information on what the student's interests are, right? Let's see. What are specific ways to show depth and authenticity if one does start a nonprofit? I think if the student is the one starting the nonprofit and they're willing to do all the work of starting a nonprofit and is not just a counselor or a teacher or a parent starting the nonprofit and they're the one doing all the work, that shows a lot of authenticity on the student's part, right? Because that already shows a commitment of time and energy. Uh, I'm not sure if that answers the question. I think if it's truly, if they're willing to put in the time, energy, and commitment, I think that's already a demonstration of authenticity. Uh, any recommendations for G7, G8? There's a lot of camps available for G7 and G8 for that. If we are a rising junior, have narrowed down activity lists and leadership roles, what are some next steps we should take in preparation for the college admission process? So you are going to be a junior, right? Um, you've narrowed down the activity list and leadership roles. I think you should continue investing within those activities, right? Uh, Here's the thing with leadership roles as well. You can be the president of a club, but if you're a president that doesn't do anything, then it's also is not enough to just be the president, if that makes sense, right? Because you don't just want to put the leadership position, you want to demonstrate that you use that position to create something of tangible impact. So my recommendation is it's so wonderful that the student has leadership roles. Now it's time to do something actionable with those leadership roles, right? Improve those clubs, right? Make the club better, right? Invest in those clubs. They can also start thinking about the college essays and maybe looking into some G11 summer programs. There are some that are only open to G11 that are very prestigious. How do I narrow down my list of extracurriculars for universities like MIT, which only allow 4? Are there certain extracurriculars that are more important? The obvious answer is you should choose extracurriculars that are related to your major of choice. For instance, if you want to study computer science, probably don't spend one of those 4 slots talking about how you, well, actually, I think it depends. Probably you don't want to spend it talking about creative writing unless you have 3 very prestigious activities already. So for importance, you definitely want to emphasize the ones that are most prestigious and selective, as well as the ones in which you feel you contributed the most to. That demonstrates your leadership skills, your investment, etc. the most. For that one. I think for that, you should at least first make a list of all your activities and then think, okay, which one's the one I was most invested in, right? And then think which one's best for my major, right? And then prestige, selectivity. Definitely speak to a counselor or someone regarding that. Because I think, again, I would need to see the actual activities and what your major is before I can give any, what was the term? Specific advice or concrete advice. I think if you are interested in it, because I think a lot of people want recommendations, we do offer 30-minute consultations. And of course, the independent research project, which I mentioned before. I do think this is a great experience. I've had quite a few of my students complete this project. And one of them, which is who is now attending a summer research program where she's working in a lab. And I think having the experience of writing her paper definitely helped in gaining her admission to that program. Also, I want to mention the SAT ACT bootcamp. So if you're interested, this is the QR code. And then, of course, the college application essay workshop. Clint is teaching this workshop. He graduated from Harvard, I believe. And I think he's a really amazing teacher in constructing stories for the students. So if you're interested, please do sign up. What are specific ways to show depth and authenticity? I think I would need to know more about the nonprofit, or at least I would need to do more research on a nonprofit for this part. I think for this one, there's a question in chat. Oh, apologies. I didn't think I see it. Is there a website or resource that shows the most competitive majors for each UC or Ivy? I think some of them will release the admission rate for the UC or Ivy. So I think sometimes for the Ivies, they will divide it they will release results based on the majors. So you should, of course, check their own admission results for that. I think there are some resources online, but again, sometimes for resources, you're just never sure how accurate they are unless it's officially from the UC or Ivy. So it's something I would personally need to do more research on for this one. Some, of course, are no-brainers. For instance, UC Berkeley, the competitive major would be computer science. For UPenn, it would be business/Wharton. But again, quite a few of them do release a breakdown based on major. Is attending Cosmos helpful for UC admission for all colleges or for all colleges in general? Oh, I think you should I think Cosmos is a good program. But I always tell my students that just because, so the benefit of Cosmos isn't the fact that it's a UC program. The benefit of Cosmos is that I think it's a decent science program overall. Probably better than maybe some of the online courses offered by Ivies. So yes, I do think it's helpful for all colleges in general, especially if you attend Cosmos, what do they call them again? A cluster related to your future interests. And even with attending summer programs, I tell all my students, getting admitted is not enough. Now you're there at the summer program, don't be passive, right? You also want to take advantage of all your resources there. Right? You have the professor's contact information, email your professor, show up to office hours, be invested in your project, see what else you can do with your project, right? So again, it's not just attending, be invested, right? Be active, don't just sit passively. But yeah, I think Cosmos is a good program, so I think it should help. Okay, if there are no questions, we can just end it here. Thank you to all the people who participated earlier. I really enjoyed reading through your responses, and I agree that it is very difficult to distinguish between highly qualified candidates. So if you have no more questions, you're free to leave. Thank you again for joining the seminar. We hope to see you at future seminars or at some of our courses in the future.